Welcome to the I'll Think About It podcast. Nothing is off limits in this space because we are interested and curious about everything. Join us for a thoughtful journey into the heart of the deep issues of our day with a few laughs along the way. Let's do this. In this podcast, we talk about gun ownership and who the typical gun owner is. You'll probably be surprised that your stereotype isn't quite correct. At least I was. I think you were too, Erin, right?
I was really surprised. I was not completely clued in on who owned guns, who's been buying guns over the last couple of years, and we went into the statistics on that, so be ready for that when you're listening. But you'll see when you get to the other side, it's worth knowing that because there's a lot of information out there, and unless you know the actual numbers, it's hard to get a true picture of who gun owners are.
Right. Okay, and keep in mind that in the show notes will be at least all the references that we talked about, and then some if you want to go into some further research, which I encourage you to do. Okay, and here is the podcast.
Yes, enjoy. And welcome to our first inaugural podcast. And today we're starting with a pretty spicy topic. Erin, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, something about guns.
Yes.
What was it?
Well, we're going to talk about who gun owners are.
Oh.
Yes. We have a lot of, our society has a lot of different pictures of what gun owners look like, and we want to just break that down. And
so we're going to talk about what gun owners are really like.
What they're really like.
Ah.
Yes. As opposed to how they are portrayed, which in some cases might overlap. In some cases, I think a lot of cases, they don't.
Okay. That sounds interesting.
Yes. But first, I wanted to ask you, or actually, how are you doing? I wanted to ask you a couple things today and get just to know you.
Well, today I'm a little on the tired side, I have to admit. But short of that, no, everything's good. I had a good week, had a productive week. Enjoyed watching the World Series. Unfortunately, my team lost.
Who's your team?
I was hoping for the Phillies.
Okay.
Yeah, they were the big underdogs. It was kind of one of the, if they had won, it would have been one of those great all-time underdog winning kind of scenarios. But as it was, probably the best team did in fact win. It was the Astros.
Oh, I'm
Boo
sorry.
Hiss.
I'm sorry that your team didn't win.
But, yeah.
I didn't even know that the World Series was on. So
yeah, I mean, it's like either you're in the know or you don't care.
Or
right?
you don't care.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm admitting that. It's Monday. Today is November 7th. And I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you voted?
I have not voted yet.
Oh.
No, I am
Really?
I am a same day voter kind of guy,
Okay.
or voting day voter kind of guy.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, your thoughts about people who vote
Well,
before the day of voting. We'll get to this in another podcast
that'll be
in
a
great
big
detail,
topic,
but just since it's the day before voting, I thought I might ask you.
I'm kind of I don't want to be a hypocrite about voting, and I'm a big believer that we should have simply one voting day.
Okay.
So I don't believe in early voting, and so I make a point of going and actually voting in person on voting day, which is tomorrow for us.
Yes. I don't know. Josh pulled out our ballots today, and we're going to get them all, I think, filled out tonight.
Right.
We probably, I don't know, we might go over there in person because it sounds like the theater, right, the old theater right up the street.
I didn't even look at where it was.
Is a polling spot, so we'll probably go up there, and if it just looks, or if we run out of time, we'll just drop them in the bin. I know.
No.
I know.
No, you can't drop them in the bin.
But last time I've done it before, and I can track it all the way through. Okay.
Oh, that's a topic for another podcast.
Okay, I know. It's more of laziness, even though I know what I'm supposed to do.
No, that's all right.
Okay, well.
That's all right.
And any movies you've seen? Any other stuff going on?
Well,
You've been focused on the World Series.
Yes, I did. That was the primary media consumption of the week, but I did start watching I Love Lucy again. And I haven't really watched it for a few years. You know, I have all the DVDs or whatever. And just every time it's just amazing at how good that show was. I it's just incredible how good that show was. And now we know a little bit about Lucille Ball and her how that show was created. And when you watch the show, it seems so like spontaneous, but it was exceedingly heavily rehearsed. But you cannot tell. They're so natural. They're so seemingly like impromptu that you would have no idea that she especially was like rehearse. And so everything you see on there, for the most part, was completely, utterly planned. And it's just amazing to me to see that it could seem so fresh and not rehearsed.
I did not. I watched I Love Lucy growing up. I haven't watched it really as an adult. I have friends that love I Love Lucy.
You know, it's
rewatch
really,
it.
It's really worth it.
I think Hannah and I tried to go back and watch it, and I'm so bad about watching black and white.
Oh, really? That's your big.
I don't know.
Well, that's why you don't watch old movies.
I know.
No, you have to. You have
it's
to.
not okay.
Yeah, you kind of have to get
I'm
over
not proud of
that.
Okay.
Well, look at it this way. Well, I know for a fact that you do like some black and white photographs, don't you?
Yes, I do. I love black and white photos.
So look at it from that perspective. Say, look at how amazing that they were able to use the black and white medium in a visual way.
Okay.
Maybe that'll change your approach. But listen, the content is so good and so funny. It's dated in a lot of ways, obviously, and but it's so good to watch. It's so fun to watch. I laugh basically on every one. The only other series I've ever watched that I can go back to years later and enjoy as much as Seinfeld. You know,
Seinfeld is a classic.
Completely different kind of show, but
timelessly funny.
Yeah, timelessly funny. And anyway, yeah, so that was my big media consumption week.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, Lucille Ball is going to be a fan favorite forever. They just did the movie. I didn't see the.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
I didn't see it. I don't know.
I'm not a big fan of biopics, generally speaking. They seem a little too, especially these days, a little too, I don't know, messagey and.
That's true.
Yeah.
Trying to maybe make more out of the character.
Yeah, exactly. And I, as a matter of fact, I remember a friend of mine was telling me that her daughter was a little, I don't know if it was this production or if it was a biography somebody was written, where they kind of went into this whole, Lucille Ball was the first woman, she was women power on this. And her daughter said something to the effect of, you have no idea, my mother wasn't that at all. She didn't want to be the head of a studio. She was kind of forced into that situation through the divorce. She hated being the head of the studio. That was not who she was. So all these people trying to turn her into this,
I am woman, hear me roar.
Yeah, it's just like, no, that was not who she was, according to her daughter, as she tells the story. And she was really kind of miffed about that. She said, no, she was a woman. She liked being a mom. She liked her work, but she didn't want to be in charge of a studio and all this kind of stuff. That was all Desi. He was the business brain behind that. And when they did their separation, he kind of sold out, and she, just by virtue of necessity, had to start running the studio. And I don't think she did it for more than 2 or 3 years or something. It was a relatively short amount of time, maybe a little bit longer. But I think it sounded like she was quite happy to divest herself of that responsibility when she did. Anyway.
Well, no, it's a really good point. I think a lot of movies today do go back and try to recreate or make something out of a character that maybe wasn't the original intention of the character or what they were thinking at the time.
Yeah.
They want to go back and put intentions on the person that were based on today's standards, not based on what was happening in the past.
Especially if it coincides with a type of message.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, okay. What movie did I see? Oh, we just saw a movie called The Greatest Beer Run Ever, which is silly.
Was this
sounding.
safe for kids?
It was. Actually, it is based on a true story of a man during the Vietnam War who has all his friends there. It's set in he lives in New York. The friends live in New York, and all these young men on his block have all gone to Vietnam. He hasn't gone because he's in the Merchant Marine, and he decides that he wants to bring smuggle beer into Vietnam and bring beer to his friends.
Okay. All right.
And no, it's based on a true story. And
Okay.
a lot of the guys are like the ones that survived Vietnam are still alive today. And it started out a little rough. Zac Efron starred in it. I've heard his name so many times. I had never even seen him before.
He's like a young guy, right?
He's not that young. He's probably 30 or something.
Well,
Anyway, it's
listen, that's young to me.
that's
now.
young. I'm thinking young, teenage young. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was a good movie. Started out a little bit rough, but we ended up liking it. It had a good message. I mean, he sort of was this dumb sort of guy stumbling along doing something very dumb, and when he gets over there, all of his friends are like, "You came into a war zone to bring us beer? You like an idiot?" And he realizes that he was an idiot, but then he is awakened to how terrible it is over there, and comes home sort of a changed guy. And it was a good message.
Yeah, and he gets to kind of come over there as an observer in a way instead of just a combatant or a participant.
Exactly. And he sort of gets himself behind enemy lines by people think he's a CIA agent because he's sort of dressed in plain clothes,
Right.
but over in the middle of Vietnam. So why else would he be there?
Yeah, right.
So it's good.
That sounds interesting. What is your rating on a scale of 1 to 10?
Rating about a 6.
Oh, that's
6
pretty
or
rough.
7. No, I mean, for a free movie, you could see a 6 or 7
Man,
for free.
If somebody doesn't tell me it's an 8,
Oh, it takes a lot for a movie to be an 8, though.
I know that's why I don't see very many movies,
Well, yeah. Okay. I mean,
especially a comedy. If somebody tells me a comedy is a 6 or a comedic type film is a 6, I'm suspicious.
well, yeah. Okay. I think, I don't know that you would like it.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know that it'd be worth it. It's one of those movies you would watch just to be entertained and
Right.
with a slightly, with a good message at the end, but not the best movie.
Okay, so what's our topic for today?
Well, we are going to talk about people who own guns. And with the ever-growing debate over people who carry guns, how they should be carried, who should be carrying them, and what I feel is a caricature-like description of people who carry guns. I think that the time for this conversation is now.
When you say the caricature of people who carry guns, you mean the kind of person that people think carry a gun versus the kind of people who actually carry guns?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I think that we have a news media in our country who likes to portray gun owners as a certain stereotype. And, it's interesting. Everywhere in society, they say don't stereotype. But when it comes to gun owners, they love to stereotype.
Yeah, well, that's because they consider them conservative right-wing crazies, right? So
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
just a part of the overall stereotype probably
Yes.
in a lot of people's minds.
And easy targets.
And well, what do you mean easy target?
I think it is very easy to, for the media, I think they find it very easy to stereotype gun owners. So I think
Yeah,
it
that's
makes gun
probably
owners
true.
an easy target. White
Especially
males.
since there isn't a lot of representation in the media of gun owners, right? So
Yeah.
you can just throw out your typical stupid caricature and nobody's going to challenge it.
No one's going to challenge it. You end up having challenges in conservative circles, but across the board, there's very little
Yeah,
challenging
the
of
general media,
general media does.
So what is the caricature? How would you describe it?
They describe a lot of gun owners as white, male, and young, but actually most gun owners are over 40, and most gun owners have money. We'll get into the statistics further on in the podcast, but if you make an income under $25,000, chances are you do not own a gun. Most gun owners are going to be over
Is that because of the
80,000.
cost of the gun?
probably the cost of the gun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cost of the gun, the access for the cost of the gun, the access to permits, having to follow through on that takes time.
So other than white male, what other aspects of the gun owner is the stereotype?
Well, we've got the gun owner. I've got a couple different ones. We have the gun owner as the militia member and
With his bunker?
with his bunker, his grenades, and a lot of guns.
Right.
We have the gun owner as the hunter. And that's actually, that would be in the media circles that try to portray the gun owners poorly. The hunter is the least offensive, I think.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, even they got those TV shows where they have hunter. It's a common thing you see in the media is the hunting aspect. Although you do certainly get the impression that as a group, hunters are still a very small group.
Yeah.
So it's not of total gun ownership. I don't know what percentage they are, but at least in the hunter proportion in the population at large seems relatively small overall.
It is. And it depends on where you're talking about, too, demographically, obviously. In California, there's going to be fewer hunters. We have more people. We have a higher population in California, but, per 100,000 people, that's how they like to measure statistics, it's going to be smaller in California than it's going to be up in Alaska or in Montana. I mean, Alaska, there's a lot of hunting up in by everyone, the native Alaskans and, non-native Alaskans. That's a very common way to, hunt for food with using a gun or for safety. I mean, there's bears everywhere in Alaska. Most people carry guns.
So how does the caricature differ from the reality of what actually is your typical gun, if there is such a thing?
Well, we will get into that there are, it's interesting because you look back on the gun ownership and how it's changed actually in the last couple of years and who has been purchasing guns. I mean, in the last couple of years, 50% of the gun ownership has been, or gun purchases have been by women.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Women are.
That's shocking.
Yes.
Was that from the FBI?
It's not when you register your gun, it's when you purchase. You have to get a permit. And so they get your demographics.
Okay.
It's pretty specific on who's purchasing guns.
That's still a fascinating little tidbit, though, that over that, and we're talking basically over the COVID years.
It's over the COVID years. Yeah.
Is there any speculation on the reason for that?
Yeah, actually, the Gun and a Girl surveyed women who were new to firearms and inquired about their motivation to learn about guns.
I'm sorry, Gun and a Girl, is that a magazine?
It's called Gun and a Girl. It's an organization.
Oh, it's an organization.
Yeah, they promote gun safety for women, gun lessons. They market to women, and just sort of they enable women to have easy access to guns. And they did some really interesting. They recorded some really interesting statistics, and they've got 14% of women are purchasing guns. They have fears of riots, mobs, civil unrest. 12% have purchased because of upcoming elections and fear of gun bans. That's a big subject too. The gun ownership went up when people perceived that Biden, and then when Biden won.
Yeah,
people started purchasing more guns.
I think that's a pretty well-established trend whenever the government switches into a mode where the people in power seem more likely to restrict ownership, purchasing spikes. And I think that's been seen quite a number of times over the years.
Yes.
So that's not surprising, particularly.
It's perception, too, which is interesting because you don't even know what they're recording this prior to perceived bans going into place.
Right, yeah. It's just what they suspect might happen.
Yeah, so my behavior is affected by what I think is going to happen in the future. So you're causing me to buy, you're going to ban guns in the future, but that's causing me to buy guns now. So you're actually having, it's an inverse relationship.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's 8% lack of law enforcement resources, 7% pandemic uncertainty of access to essentials.
But what was the top item?
The top item was 14% were riots. So this was
so
taken.
that would be people in urban areas that were affected by BLM riot type stuff.
Absolutely,
or
whatever
Antifa or whatever.
All the riots that were going on during the during the pandemic year, especially in the summer of 2020.
I mean, how many reasons are there? Like 12 reasons?
No, we're almost to the end. They're kind of some of these are a little bit overlapping in my mind, but 7% pandemic uncertainty, access to essentials, which is a little bit interesting. Are you thinking you're going to have your gun so you can go buy your toilet paper? I don't know.
Yeah, that is.
I don't know what that one means. I don't know what that means. 7% rising unemployment, which then would result in a fear of crime.
Right.
Okay. And then 7% fear of targeted violence.
Right.
So that could fit into just...
Yeah, a number of them. I mean, the overarching theme there to me would be more of a kind of a personal safety
Absolutely.
mixed in with a dose of, well, they might not let me buy them in the future, so I better get one now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it, wow, that is fascinating. So they said 50% of
50%. Yeah. The interesting.
what was the average before that? Do we know?
I don't have that now.
Okay.
Actually, no, I don't have it written down, but I believe it was in about 30%.
Okay. So a big spike.
Yeah.
70-30 versus 50-50.
Yes. And we have, this is the period from January 2019. So actually, this is pre-pandemic through April of 2021. This is when they measured this.
Oh, okay.
Almost 50% of gun owners were women.
Okay, so that has to be, gosh, why would that, that's weird to me. This is pre-pandemic, right?
Pre-pandemic and into the pandemic.
And into it. So maybe that latter part of that period is where the big mega spike was. Well, anyway, it is interesting that there has been a shift, at least recently, in who the new gun purchasers are.
Well, another interesting part of that is some of the marketing that has been targeted towards males in the past. In some cases, they say it's been saturated. So you've saturated the market of all the men that are going to buy guns. I mean, you have some up and coming men, 18-year-olds coming into the market, or new enthusiasts, right? That might have been pandemic driven, or yeah, it might have been, hey, in 2020 they decided I'm going to get a gun, and where maybe they were on the fence before, but many of the male buyers that was a saturated market,
right.
And so they switched their marketing to more towards women, and then you have a lot of these like girl and a gun groups coming out, enabling women to purchase guns. Enabling, yes, giving power. Okay. Giving power to, allowing, marketing.
Well, it's not really enabling them, but it's
okay. Well, what would you say?
It's a type of outreach,
outreach.
Gun outreach.
Gun outreach. Actually, it is actually gun. And they've used that. That is a word. That's a term that's being used because there's been gun outreach in the female community, and then there's gun outreach in the Black community and the Hispanic community. And then,
now, who's actually doing that outreach? Is it gun manufacturers? Do we know?
It's gun manufacturers, but it's more small groups within that racial makeup. Then they have their group. Like, for instance, there's the Asian American gun group. There's the, let me see here. I've got the...
It's just a little strange to me. It feels like there is a concerted effort on some higher level to start looking at the individual demographic subgroups and saying, oh, okay, well, gun ownership, I don't know, let's say in Asians is only 10%. We think we could push that to 20%. So let's create a group and target them. In other words, it doesn't sound organic to me. It has the feel that there's maybe like I said, manufacturers or NRA or some kind of political entity perhaps that is... Well, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It just feels a little...
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that, we've got this Asian Pacific Americans have been buying guns to protect themselves from hate crimes, according to the APA Gun Owners Association. So, there's a story of a gentleman he was a Japanese man, and within his neighborhood in San Francisco.
APA, Asian Pacific
Americans, yeah. Within his neighborhood, there was a sort of a string of Asian hate crimes. And he's decided, he's 60, and he's like, I'm going to buy a gun.
Well, I can certainly see with the riots that there would be, because you figure a lot of the larger urban areas have those large pockets of, like Chinatown and whatever the different, every big city has those sections of town where you have a large demographic pocket. And if they felt threatened by a lot of those urban riots, I could certainly see a big spike in those regions if gun ownership was low.
Yes. There's a spike there. So just taking Asian hate crime, there's Asian hate crime. Then there's an individual like the man in the story I just talked about. He wants to buy a gun, and then he seeks out his local association in his case, the Asian American Gun Owners Association.
I don't know. It
And
just
then
strikes me as odd that you would go to that. I mean, why wouldn't you just go to the NRA? Why wouldn't you just go to?
Well, I think no one wants to go to the NRA anymore.
okay.
They're having so many problems.
Okay.
They're almost
Fair
bankrupt for one thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. For me, I would just be like, oh, well, I want a gun, so I go to the gun. I mean, I don't have any need for art outreach, but
if you've never owned a gun, and you also
okay, fair enough.
So you've never owned a gun, but you want to own a gun, and you want to own a gun well. You want to be a good citizen. Good citizen,
right, okay.
but also someone who owns a gun. So you're going to go to the group that's the easiest for you to identify with.
Okay.
If you are a minority, and you're going to say, "Hey, can you shoot me? Tell me how to shoot a gun."
So what if you're a white guy?
Maybe then you go to the NRA. No, actually, there's, it's interesting in all these statistics and people who are keeping demographics on this. There's some from the NRA, but there's a lot of different other national shooting organizations, and they're the ones that are keeping the statistics.
I mean, to your point, maybe there's been a big blossoming of alternative organizations precisely because the NRA has had issues in the last few years.
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe that's also playing into it.
Well, and do you feel like maybe you're going to go to a group that's smaller and that, you're not going to get lost in the crowd and that has a local chapter and you can go in there and they're going to teach you how to purchase your gun, how to use it safely, how to store it safely. And, because there's a lot of issues with gun storage.
Right.
Apparently guns, so many guns are stolen out of cars. That's what a lot of people who are gun control advocates talk about as a big con of owning a gun, is that a lot of guns are stolen. People don't take care of them properly.
That's okay. I'm surprised by that, but I guess I just haven't had that experience or know anybody that has had their guns stolen.
Oh gosh,
but I guess that
that
depends on, I guess, where you live and if you're in a high crime area.
Yeah. My dad had his family rifle stolen out of his motorhome in L.A., and it was prior to the L.A. riots.
Really?
Yes, he did.
Okay, so there you go. So then I guess I do kind of know somebody.
No, I'm thinking about that. He had it was his grandpa's.
So it was like an heirloom.
It was like an heirloom, and it was a I don't think it was a .22. I think it was an actual rifle, and he.
Well, .22 can be a rifle.
Well, sorry, a higher caliber rifle.
Gotcha.
And he had it he kept it in his motorhome, and he had it for camping, and he just kept it in there. And the motorhome was broken into, and he was up in LA, and I think he might have been at the airport. Maybe his car was at the airport. It was when he used to drive his motorhome and as his car.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he did say after the fact, he's like, I hope that it was like a year later that the LA riots happened. He's like, I hope whoever stole my gun wasn't
using
running around in the LA riots. I mean, it was a very, very old. And this was, when were the LA riots? This was.
Gosh, wasn't that in the 80s? I want to say.
It was after I graduated from high school, early 90s, I think.
So early, so 1990.
Yeah. So.
Okay. All right. So we're getting a little bit of a picture then. So it's a pretty broad swath of people here. Clearly, we're not just talking about white males with money.
No. The female ownership is very, very interesting.
So that's gone up for new purchasers or purchasing, but the total amount I'm sure is still skewed heavily to men.
It is skewed heavily to men. However, what's interesting is that white individuals make up about 60% of the U.S. population.
Okay. So
you're naturally going to have a high percentage of white men owning guns because they naturally make up 60% of the population.
Right. But that assumes that white culture, or whatever you want to call it, also, for instance, I can speculate that certain demographic groups just culturally may not be quite as keen on gun ownership. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But yeah, all things being equal, if whites are 60% of the population, of course, then a majority of gun owners would be white. Okay, all right. Well, that's actually an interesting little bit of data mining, I think, that we've got there. That the recent trend is that women have really upped their purchasing of guns just over the last couple of years.
Well, listen to this. The National African American Gun Owners Association has seen an increase of 1,000 new members each month. And the perception of threat is not imagined. In the 2021 survey, and this is the National Gun Survey, we'll reference in just a little bit. They asked respondents if they had ever needed to use their gun for self-defense, and 31% responded that they used it in a self-defense situation, and some more than once.
Yeah. Okay. So again, that just goes right into the whole theory that I posited, that it's these people, it's truly for self-defense in those cases because they are living in dangerous environments.
Well, what I found so interesting is they've got 18% in these cases, 18% actually fired their gun. So they actually...
You mean like at a range or...
Oh, no. In their self-defense situation, they needed to fire the gun. They didn't report whether or not the other person had died as a result of them firing their gun. Just that the gun was fired 18% of the time. 15% or 50% of the time, they showed the gun without firing.
They brandished
it. Yes, absolutely. They brandished their weapon.
Okay.
And 31% never even showed the gun. They just said they had a gun. So most cases, we've got 80% of the time, the gun was not even fired.
Doesn't need to be fired, right?
It doesn't need to be fired.
Just the having of the gun is enough to...
Yes. And then 25% were inside of their house, inside self-defense. 54% were on their property. So is that someone you're standing on your property perimeter and you've got someone coming in?
Well, actually, and interesting to me is that it's almost 50% that it wasn't on their property. That's kind of shocking.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
20, we've got 25% inside.
Right, but you said on the property, which would include inside.
Sorry, no, that's outside on the property, on your outside property.
So 75% of them roughly happens in or on your property.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and then we have extrapolated to the population at large. This suggests that approximately 25.9 million gun owners have been involved in an incident in which the presence of a firearm deterred crime on some 44.9 million occasions. This translates to approximately 1.5 million incidents per year for which the presence of a firearm deterred crime.
So all of this information here, and that's a lot of statistics and stuff, obviously, but all of this is still revolving very directly around this concept of self-defense.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with the constitutional arguments about having weapons to protect yourself against the government. So that doesn't seem to be a very big motivating factor for a lot of people, maybe even the majority, maybe even the vast majority of people. It's truly a self-defense purchase.
I would say it was a self-defense purchase for most of these people. They might have a long-term goal or a greater purpose to say, I can own a gun because the Second Amendment says I can own a gun. But if you ask them for their immediate purpose, it's for self-defense, perceived self-defense, which could come in any forms. It could come.
This kind of flies in the face again of the stereotype, right? Because one of the stereotypes is some militia guy.
Yeah,
who's getting ready for the feds to come and get him in his bunker. Well, no, that's all. This data is indicating the vast majority of people are doing it for their own personal self-defense purpose. And by the way, I'm not saying that having a gun to protect yourself against the government is a bad idea. I actually think that's a very important thing, but that isn't the average gun owner.
That's not. We have someone in our life who just got his CCW, right? Mm-hmm. And what was his reason?
I think it's more just the constitutional argument and also there is a certain convenience factor. We're in California, and in California, it would be very easy to run afoul the law. Just transporting your gun to a gun range there's some gotchas, from what I understand. So having a CCW, a concealed carry permit, will allow you to have the gun in ways that you won't run afoul of the law as easily. So, there could be that could be enough of a reason for somebody, especially if they're a frequent user of guns at ranges and that kind of thing. But in his case, I think it was a combination. It was that, and also just that because he felt that he wanted to be able to have weapon on him without it being all out there in everybody's face in certain circumstances.
I've also heard that a lot of people in our area are getting CCW because right now we have a sheriff that's
right. It's
friendly, quote
it's an
unquote,
opportunity situation because at least in California, I don't know about in other states, but in California, the permits seem to be controlled basically by the county sheriffs, and so their policy can be more liberal or more lenient in the issuing of the permits. And right now, in our county, we have a more lenient permitter, so more people are doing it. But they have to renew it, right? On some, I think
you have to renew it. I don't know
so
what the
even if you have a lenient one now, that could change in a couple years.
Well, there are different laws. There's shall issue, may issue,
Right.
and the shall issue is the one that says they just have to issue.
You have to do it right.
But the may issue gives a lot more rules. However, if you have a sheriff that is friendly to may issue,
right,
you can end up in a situation where they're always going to default to yes.
Mm-hmm.
But in states that are a lot more liberal, actually, we're in California, so but however, it does depend on the county here in California.
County.
In other states, you might not end up with liberal sheriffs, and so if you end up in a may issue,
I think in New York, even though they had a very strict, I guess, law on the issuing of the permits that the Supreme Court struck down, or at least partly struck down, they're still just making it very onerous to go through the process.
Yeah.
It's just that's the other end of the spectrum there.
Yeah, you have to prove you basically need to be someone who's being stalked and have proof. I'm just using that as an example, but it's in those may issue cases, it's very, very difficult. You have to have, or maybe your job is such that you need to have that. Maybe it's even not law enforcement, but maybe you carry money or you do something where you're carrying valuables, you own a jewelry store or something.
So, what else can we glean from our research here on what the typical gun owner is or isn't?
Well, we can certainly say that there are gun owners that are out there that are, as are in any, across the spectrum of our society, there's going to be bad apples. And so, I'm not going to say that every gun owner has a gun who's purchased legally, has a gun for the right reasons. But is it for us to determine what the reasons are? Where does that come into play with red flag laws and?
Yeah, well, that's a.
That's a whole different subject.
That's one of them.
However,
holes,
it's
obviously you're going to have even legal owners who are not having a weapon for the right reason, right?
Yeah.
The crazed ex-husband who's decided that he's going to kill his ex-wife's boyfriend, whatever, can go and purchase a gun legally, and
and if he doesn't have a record,
if he's not a felon, and it's of course I guess he has a 2-day, 12-day, whatever the waiting period is.
10-day, I think in California, I'm not sure.
But a determined person, that's not an impediment.
Well, and that if you're a determined person, you're going to accomplish what you're going to accomplish.
Yeah, that's the thing,
regardless of what your weapon is. It could be a car, it could be something else.
And that's the whole argument, right? About why restricting gun ownership doesn't actually net any overall safety. Theoretically, if you could take out all of the hundreds of millions of guns out of the United States, gun crime would go down if that was possible. But that doesn't mean crime goes down.
It doesn't mean crime goes down.
Right. This is one of those fallacious arguments, and you see it all the time in the media, especially in this election cycle. The governor of New York right now, she was talking about how, well, we got to get rid of these guns because, the gun violence is just this problem. And that's the source of all the crime. And it just seems like a ridiculously illogical argument to me. You don't have crime because there's guns. You have crime because you have criminals. And criminals are going to use whatever means are at their disposal. And if it's not a gun, it's a knife.
I was just going to say the
Right.
knife, because they've got, what about all the knifings in London?
Yeah.
They were just
perfect example, right?
to the point where you couldn't even carry, there was a joke at one point, you couldn't even carry a steak knife around if you were transporting it or something,
Yeah.
because
It
it
would
could have
be
been a weapon.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's that. I mean, and that's a whole nother topic, obviously, but it just strikes me that a lot of Americans, clearly this data shows, want a gun for their own personal protection.
yes.
And why isn't it right for us to do that? And then when you throw on top of it, using the liberal talking points, since blacks are far more likely to want a weapon, Asians, basically every minority wants to have weapons more than whites. Clamping down on gun ownership is by their measure, a racist policy. Now, I don't subscribe to that kind of logic, but they do.
Well, okay, let's look at a case back in Chicago. It was the McDonald versus Chicago in 2010. A black man named Otis, he wanted to clean up his neighborhood, and he was getting pushback in the neighborhood from the local criminals that he was trying to actually eradicate. And in the course of that, he has applied for a gun. He cannot get a gun because the gun bans were so strong in Chicago, he couldn't get a gun. So then he goes to, the case goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says that, no, you can get it. You can have a gun for your personal protection. So here was this man. He was a black man. He wants to protect himself against the element of the neighborhood, but he was being, I don't know if you call that racist, but if he's living in a high crime area.
Well, again, it's their definition of what's racist, right? To them, everything is a matter of statistics. So that if 15% of Americans are black, then 15% of all rich people should be black. 15% of all gun owners, whatever the metric is you want to use. That's the lens that they perceive everything, which I think is ridiculous. So yeah, it would be very easy to argue in this case that it's because he's black. He's, in Chicago, which is, I don't know what the percentage of black people is, but I'm sure it's higher than most other areas of the country. And so therefore keeping, Chicago as a gun-free zone is inherently more racist. So you could argue that using their logic, their twisted logic. To me, it's really just a matter of, listen, the Constitution says you shall not infringe upon the right of a person to own a gun. And if he feels he needs to do that for his own protection, then who are we to say no?
Well, I think that's the other side of the argument is who are we to say no? What about, we haven't talked about, we can talk about homicides in 2021, 21,000 people dead from gunshots in 2021.
21,000?
21,000 from gun homicides.
Is that
gun-related homicides.
Is that a typical number year by year?
Yeah, it went up a little bit, but it's been 2018? 1 year was really high, and then it went back down, and then it started climbing back up. But the sadder number is 26,000 suicides by gun in the same amount of time.
Okay, so that is another argument, right?
Yeah.
About why to get rid of guns, because obviously, and it's usually men, from my understanding. It's if the gun wasn't available, would the man or would the person still commit suicide?
Well, and that is the question. I don't know. You and I, again, we have someone in our life who committed suicide by gun in 2020. Right. Tragic, absolutely tragic situation. And I have thought many times about that individual and if if he wouldn't have owned a gun, would he have tried? Was he so determined that he would have done something else?
Yeah.
Personally, I think he would have tried something else.
Yeah,
that was just the easiest.
It's an interesting hypothesis, and because I consider this a hypothesis that, and not something that's, I don't even know if it's verifiable, to be honest with you, but this notion that 26,000 people murdered themselves, suicide by gun. If the gun wasn't there, a large portion of the 26,000 would be alive. I mean, this is the argument that people make, but how do we know that? And
we don't know it.
If you really want to kill yourself, I mean, there's an awful lot of ways to do it. And even if, and this is the other struggle that I have, let's say you could eliminate that 26,000 death toll. Let's say you could make it go down to zero by taking away all the guns. Is that actually better for society, for the society to be defenseless? Like at some point, there's a cost to freedom, right?
Yeah,
it all kind of comes down to that, doesn't it?
Because you're saying we're going to eliminate 26,000, which you don't actually even know that getting rid of the guns is going to eliminate that. Right. You're doing that by taking away a freedom that you're sure to take care of to solve a problem you don't actually know that you're going to solve.
That you're going to solve, yeah.
So
it would be akin to, you say, I don't know what the number is, but let's say you have 100,000 people die in car accidents every year. Well, we get rid of all cars.
Oh, well.
Right? Nobody would say yes to that because the value of the car to everything in our lives, and it's a certain type of freedom, right? The freedom of movement. It gives us, vastly increases our freedom of movement that we would never otherwise have. No one would ever consider doing that.
No one would ever consider doing it. And that's why we don't, I mean, there are many other things in society that are in the wrong hands, that are, dangerous in the wrong hands, but we don't legislate what we can do based on the worst of the users. Right. So that would be if there were drunk drivers, and that would be saying we can't drive cars because there's drunk drivers that kill people, which is terrible. Or
we have to, bars have to be taken, that it's illegal to serve alcohol.
Illegal. We have, in 2020, 12,000 people died from drunk driving fatalities. So that's, just under half of the people who died from suicide.
Right.
Approximately. But we're not taking away.
Yeah, right. And you could come up with tons of
with
things
so
like
many things. I mean, there are so many examples. I mean, here's an example. Obesity, 2.8 million. This is from the WHO.
World Health
Organization. WHO, June 2021. 2.8 million people dying each year.
In the world.
Yeah. But that's a lot of people from either obesity or being from overweight, diseases that have to do with obesity, diabetes and heart disease.
Okay, so I think we're getting a better idea of who, I guess, demographically gun owners are. What else would we say about what the your typical gun owner is versus the caricature or the stereotype? If there is something to be said about it. I mean, we've already debunked the stereotype in large measure. I mean, just from this government data.
Yeah, I think we've debunked.
Yeah.
So just the stereotype.
Is there any...
It doesn't mean some of those people, the people that are being stereotyped, don't exist.
Oh, of course, no, they exist.
They absolutely exist.
Yes, sure.
However, that's not
the typical.
That's not the typical. I have this quote. It was from Johns Hopkins, and this is how they are depicting gun owners. Okay, this is interesting. The increase in the number of Americans carrying guns in public as a result of lax public carry laws fuels gun violence in a variety of ways, such as 1, allowing individuals who have a history of acting violently to carry firearms in public.
Okay.
2, promoting a shoot-first culture of violence, which we already know based on that.
What is this junk?
This is Johns Hopkins.
This is
the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions.
Who wrote it? Does it say who wrote it?
No, but I mean, I could find out.
I wish we could name names because
Yeah.
this is just
Yeah, promoting a shoot first culture of violence, which we already know from the 2021 survey, in only 18% of the cases was the gun. And these are legal owners. Okay,
yeah, but, okay. I'm not even there.
yeah.
How is it promoting a shoot first? Where did that come from?
This is standard rhetoric.
Oh no, I get it. I'm saying
It's made up.
right. That's what I
It's
mean.
made up. No.
They're just throwing out there that this promotes shoot first.
Yeah. And then here's number 3, encouraging armed intimidation by hate groups.
Encouraging armed. Oh my gosh.
And then complicating law enforcement's response to potential threats.
So when I hear something like that or read something like that, the only thing I can think of is that somebody in that organization, in this case, I guess it's Johns Hopkins, has decided that they are going to throw out a narrative because
Absolutely.
nothing they said is based on anything other than their own biases and suppositions. That's insane to me that would be considered a proper thing to be printed under such a prestigious names journal or article or whatever that is. Never mind how unethical it is.
It's unethical. I mean,
And then
it is
people read
just-
that not realizing. I mean, this is the thing, right? A lot of what we read, we only read with half our brain. Right? We're not really reading something and nitpicking every word for its meaning. This is really not how humans read typically. We're kind of surface reading. We're half reading. We're just getting the gist and we're quickly going through it. That kind of language right there will put ideas in people's heads even without them realizing it. They're going to walk away going, "Oh my God, I can't believe these guns are encouraging these hate groups to assault minorities."
Oh no!
It's insane.
When I read this, I was like, "This is you're basically saying you're just putting words out there. They're not based
on anything,
based in any statistics, and you're demonizing gun owners. It's saying gun owners are violent. They're automatically in a hate group, right? You're in a if you own a gun, you're going to be in a hate group, and you get in the way of the police. Which, by the way, those children in Uvalde who died in that classroom, many parents were trying to get in there, and the police didn't do anything. So getting in the police's way would have been beneficial in that case.
Yeah, in that case.
So I'm not sure that I'm going to put out that you're complicating law enforcement when you have situations where the police don't show up fast enough or show up and are incompetent.
Okay.
And I support the police.
And just so we're clear, too, the police, their actual constitutional purpose is after the crime is committed.
Absolutely.
This people think that police are akin to a security force. They are not. That is not their purpose. Their purpose is, if a crime is committed, to process that scenario by getting the perpetrators, et cetera, and handing it off to the judicial system. It is not to prevent crime. Now, we do know that the presence of police can be a deterrent to criminals, but that's not there's nothing in our system that ensures that or mandates that. That's just a kind of a human nature-y kind of thing. By the way, in the same exact way, if everybody's walking around carrying a 6-shooter on their holster, on their belt, people are probably not going to get in a lot of fights and all that because that everybody's armed.
Personally, and I think I've told you this before, I prefer an open carry society. The first time I saw an open carry was in Wyoming, and we were camping at it was a campground on someone's property, but they had a lot of acreage, so they were placing people where the camp spot was supposed to be. You arrived, and then they would escort you to your campsite. And the man arrived on an ATV, friendly, big, happy man, and he had a gun just right on his waist. And I thought, we're in California. You don't ever see open carry like that. And I was fascinated by it. I had no fear.
I'm going to guess that was the genesis of this topic.
Probably.
Yeah.
This was years ago. And I mean, I had already been thinking about it before then, but that sort of brought a lot of clarity into my mind of my feelings about that. And they were even more clarified within a couple weeks of that situation, because I had told a friend, I said, gosh, this was so interesting. We arrived at this campground and this man was wearing a gun on his waist. And she said, oh my gosh, wasn't that so scary? Didn't you feel so worried? And I thought, no, I did. I really had to sort of think about how I felt about it, retrace my steps. And I didn't feel scared, not even for 1 second. I felt actually safe.
So let's think about the person who asked that question. How do you get to the point of being so afraid when you see a man having a holstered weapon on his? So I'm going to speculate here for a second. In order to get there, you have to have this kind of mindset that the gun
Is going to
is
suddenly go off.
inherently could at any moment it could just pop out and start shooting, right? Like the gun is its own entity and of its own volition, or with the slightest provocation
That the man
can be turned into this mass murder weapon without with no control by any humans.
or suddenly the man is going to we are his customers, and we're his customers
Right.
1 second, and then the next 2 minutes there's going to pass, and then he's going to turn on us.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And
So you have to be in some combination of those chains of thought, which are when you think about it, they're childishly simplistic and overwrought. I mean, it's just
However, do you think that the person who thinks that way reads the article like you have the history of violence? You're promoting-
for sure.
You've read that and you've
absolutely.
internalized that, and that's become your
that's what
vision.
I mean. That's what I mean by that. You're only reading halfway,
Yeah.
and you're being, well, I mean, in a certain sense, indoctrinated or brainwashed if you're reading that kind of stuff frequently without reading it critically.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you started reading that to me, of course, I'm nitpicking every little word. But that's just not how most people are. People don't, and I'm the same way too. So a lot of what I'm not doing that every time I read something. And if you've been under that kind of influence for years, it's going to create a certain involuntary response, like this woman, because
She
this
did have an involuntary.
It's an involuntary
Yes.
response.
No, in her question to me was sincere.
Right.
And with a bit
just
of
so we're clear,
word.
I'm not disparaging her.
Oh no, I know.
No.
But I mean, she really was like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And that's when I kind of stepped back, and I couldn't believe that we were friends. We're so different on how we perceive that situation to be, the safety level of that. Mm-hmm. But that's not the last time I've heard that. I've heard people talking about, in Idaho, how they've gone into Idaho and people will have guns in Idaho, and these people walk around in guns. Why do they walk around with their guns on their waist? They just think they're trying to show off. I'm like, it just doesn't even, I don't even think about that.
Right.
It doesn't occur to me.
But we can't just dismiss that.
We can't.
The people who do feel that way, right?
No, we can't, because the people that do feel that way are responsible for, major swings in gun rights
Yes,
based on how they want to legislate those feelings.
I didn't mean it just on that. I'm saying as a human, right? I mean, people are entitled to their feelings and responses, and a lot of it isn't their fault. It's not like if all you've ever done is read pieces like what you were starting with, that John Hopkins. I mean, I don't think we got 4 sentences into it, and I'm freaking out already. But let's assume that you read that as part of your daily routine. Yeah, you're going to be pre-programmed unknowingly to, as soon as you see a guy with a gun on his waist, to have a panic attack or something.
Yeah, it can become worrisome for the people who are not used to that. I don't know if that's different from me, because I grew up in a house that had guns.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so I think, and actually that was part of their statistics out there. I think Pew did has some good research on that, on people that own guns today, how likely they were to grow up in a house that had guns, and then it's very normal for them to own a gun later. And I mean, it was probably the same gun that got stolen out of my dad's motorhome. We had that sitting in the closet my entire life. It never dawned on me to go in and touch that gun. It just didn't, just wasn't even a thing. I wasn't worried about it. I'm not saying that's right, but I am saying that
it's also probably a gender thing too, because I think as a rule, girls are not
true.
Probably interested in. Whereas for boys, it's like a tool. It's like a thing. It's like, oh, how does this work?
Yes. And Trevor, I don't know about my brother.
Yeah,
maybe I shouldn't ask that question. But here is something I will say. I had a situation happen in high school, and to this day, I graduated in 1990, so this was a long time ago, and it's still clear as day in my mind. And it was an after-school party, someone's house, and everyone was hanging around this person's house, and the owner or the teenager who lived there came down and had a handgun and was brandishing that handgun.
Was it being a show off?
Show off. Mm-hmm. And I went ballistic. I had enough wherewithal. I had the brains, I had the presence of mind at age 16 or 17, however old I was, to say, put that thing away, you're an idiot. And he was pointing it at people. And I don't even know, I didn't have I don't remember that there was gun safety in my life, right. But I knew that he shouldn't be doing that. And everyone was laughing. And this was the 80s. There wasn't all the gun education that there is now. But I to this day, I remember that clearly. And it's something I will have counseled my kids about. Like, if you ever around anyone who wants to show you a gun, you stand back, because you know about guns. We own guns, and you don't want to be around anyone who wants to show off a gun, because that's a problem.
Yeah, and especially teenagers.
Yeah.
Boy, their danger sensing mechanisms, especially for boys, having been one myself when I was young, you're just not. Safety is not at the forefront of your brain at that age for a lot of things. Of course, I'm sure, I guarantee you I would not have done that with a gun, but again, probably because I had some familiarity with it.
Well, and I think that was the issue in that case, because I know for a fact that's something my kids would never do.
Yeah,
and I know other families that are gun families, their children would never, in a million years, ever do something like that. This was a family that had if I could just have an imaginative story about what was going on in this family, is that they probably had this gun. There was no gun education in the house. It was clearly not locked up. And the kid, I can't remember, but he'd probably been drinking, and he wanted to show off this gun to this after school party, and no parents were there. And he went and started brandishing this gun all over the place.
Right.
Which even thinking back on, was the gun loaded? I'm horrified by it.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been. Well, this is an example of the type of scenario that makes people want to say, well, that's why we have to get rid of the guns. But I still fall back to the thing is, let's say you've got a certain percentage of collateral damage. To be brutally frank and dismissive about it. In our society, like, we got collateral damage because by virtue of the fact that we have a criminal element and a irresponsible element, in this case, your irresponsible parents, right? That's still, in my mind, worth the price of the freedom that we're guaranteed by having those guns.
I can see that.
And
because it's more than just freedom individually to provide your own safety for yourself and your family.
It's freedom from us from a tyrannical government if it ever gets to something that crazy.
Well, and also, the situation, if we ever had an invasion, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, right. You could, right. Yeah.
Everyone in the world knows there's, over 300 million guns in this country,
right,
and a lot of ammo. And so,
yes, and a lot of ammo.
And a lot of ammo. So I think that, those are all, obviously protection is going to be your highest need. And those needs go down the list, but it doesn't mean they don't exist.
It doesn't mean they don't exist.
Right.
And And I think this is one of those things we just have to come to grips with, just like we do with the cars. 100,000. Well, I wish we knew what the number is, but I'm sure it's a lot more people are dying in car accidents that are dying from guns every year. And we're never going to get rid of the cars, at least not for that reason.
Not for that reason. Well, we're not going to get rid of a lot of things.
So we accept that there is an inherent risk in society. Some people are going to die, but overall, it's worth it. Now, obviously, if you're the person or the family member, or whatever, where something tragic happens, you're going to be exceedingly upset about it, and rightly so. And if there is irresponsibility or criminal behavior that precipitated it, it needs to be prosecuted and handled. And I'm all for that. But that doesn't mean that you get rid of the item that was used to perpetrate the crime.
Well, I mean, the item used to perpetrate the crime, really, I mean, if you step back from the gun, it's the, very mentally ill individual in some of these cases.
Well,
and then you can put all your focus on the actual weapon, which you said isn't going to be automatically going to go off. However, the mental illness and the situations, the family situations that are creating these individuals who are so sick, who are going to go out and mentally unstable, who are going to go out and commit these shootings. Obviously, Las Vegas was an older man, but so.
Are you talking about when the concert goers or whatever were shooting from?
Yes.
Actually, you bring up something there because one of the things that I did discover when I was looking up information for the topic was, and actually I did it on this computer. There is an organization called, let's see if I can remember what it's called, the Crime Resource. I wish I had this at hand. Oh man, and I closed it all out. But it's like a crime resource organization where they take the FBI statistics, and they were doing for various reasons. And in one case, it was for mass shooting events, or I can't remember if they called it mass shooting or what. And then they would massage the FBI statistics because the FBI statistics are not totally accurate. For instance, they don't track or they don't include things where a person picked up a weapon, pointed at people in a public space, could have caused a mass casualty incident, but was actually stopped before it happened. Okay.
So they don't include that.
So they don't include that kind of incident, right? That's actually very useful information to the extent that you can track those. And some of that data is available. But one of the things in this spreadsheet that they generated that I saw was over the past, I think it was from early 2000s to 2019-ish. Only 3 of the mass shootings, most of which we've heard about, happened in non-gun-free zones or in zones where guns were allowed. And one of those was Las Vegas. Now, Las Vegas is very special because you had a guy in a high-rise or a tall building shooting down
into a
crowd.
Yes.
So I don't even like to include that. And by the way, I believe it was the highest death toll.
59, yeah.
Plus, however many injured.
So many,
right?
yeah.
So I think that's the worst incident of a gun shooting, at least in modern history. So if you take that out, the other 2 were very much smaller by comparison. And all the rest of them happened in gun-free zones. Not only that, a lot of the perpetrators, people that planned it who didn't commit the crime, or people who committed the crime and did not die, through law enforcement action or killing themselves, a lot of them all said that they chose their locations based on the fact that they knew there would be no guns there, or that they decided not to choose certain locations because they knew that people would be armed there. So this all just goes to show that you have the hypothesis that carrying guns, either in large measure or where people know it, that you've concealed it, or that a large proportion of people are concealing, or open carry, which is, I think, something that you said you're a fan of, that protects people's lives, because these guys aren't going to go for those targets. And
because they know that there's going to be someone, the good guy.
The
with
resistance
gun.
there.
But there's a lot of, you can go on the internet and you can do a Google search on good guy with a gun, and there's just on both sides of the argument.
Right. And that's why I'm saying, I'm just looking at the statistics here. And if
Yeah.
you take the mass shooting incidents, it's not including every gun thing,
Yeah.
but the incidents that cause people to want to take the guns away, it's always the mass shooting incidents.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to get rid of the guns because we just can never allow this to happen again. Well, if the vast majority of those are happening in gun-free zones, and the criminals themselves are admitting to the fact that they chose the locations based on the fact that people there weren't armed to begin with, my hypothesis that arming more of the people in more of the public places is actually a deterrent to this type of crime. They're doing the exact opposite. They're trying to take away more and more of the guns. So they're trying to make us a softer and softer target, to use military terms, right?
Yeah.
And all criminals, by and large, are persons of opportunity. They're going to commit crimes in ways and in locations and against victims that seem to be the most likely for success. This is just human nature. It's not even the criminal mind. That's just human nature mind. We go to the path of least resistance. So the kind of person who carries a gun is the kind of person that doesn't want to be a soft target. And that can be a 25-year-old mom with her 3 kids, right?
Yes.
That could be the 68-year-old black man whose neighborhood has gone to crap since he bought his house there, right? And,
you're trying to create a situation where you are,
Right.
a hard target, right?
Right.
And in order to do that, maybe you've taken self-defense classes, maybe you've purchased a gun. There's a whole spectrum of opportunities for
Right.
you if you're interested in self-defense, right? You're going to try to see what they all are and
so,
try to pursue those.
So here we can look at this both from kind of this high level argument that I'm making right now, that your average gun owner is can be anybody who doesn't want to be a victim, essentially, or they don't want their families to be victims. That crosses all demographics, that crosses all age groups. And then your data that we started off with that showed, yeah, in fact, that is the case. The government's own statistics bear that out. So this notion that it's just a bunch of white 20-something-year-old hoodlums is your typical gun owner is completely disproven and completely debunked here.
Yeah. It is. It's very much. And I actually want to reference that survey. It was the National Gun Survey in June 2021, put on by, I think it was Northwestern University. When we put the podcast show notes together, we can link to that. And so it's very good reading. I really, really liked that study. I liked how they conducted the study. I felt it was unbiased, with large sample size, 54,000 people. They were able to ask questions and do teaser questions, so they were able to really get good information out of people. And it was I felt that it was an unbiased. The way it's written is pretty unbiased, so I feel confident with that data. They weren't trying to. It didn't appear they were trying to. They had an agenda when they were putting them together.
Yeah, and I think that is something you have to be aware of, right? When you're doing what we did here, which is you actually try to do some research. You have to understand that everybody has a bias. Organizations have biases, and you have to use a little common sense in trying to realize, okay, what this feels a little sketch, or this seems legit, and try to get as many sources as possible. And we will definitely have that the list of all the things that we've talked about, and some others that we didn't have a chance to get to. But I think we've definitely established that the at least the stereotypical gun owner is not, and gun carrier
Gun carrier.
is not what people might have assumed.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in an area where you're not used to seeing it. So you're just going on your assumptions or what you're told.
Or you read articles like the Johns
Or you
Hopkins.
read articles like
But like you said, it's difficult to glean information because you can, well, we're going to talk about this in a future podcast, but you and I have a whole discussion that we're working on search.
Right.
And so when you go into search, and what we mean by search is that you're going to go to Google or you're going to go to whatever your search, DuckDuckGo, and you try to search something, it's what you're getting in search
is already, the results themselves are biased.
Yes.
And things are not going to be presented.
Yes.
Which actually do exist, but you're not going to know about.
Yeah, you're going to have to really drill down. You're going to have to be able to know how to pull things up and then see who the organizations are that are putting information out there. And, I wanted to share a personal story on protection. When my mom died, and Josh and I went up to Oregon, and we had just taken her off life support. And we went back to her house, and we were going to, sleep in her bed that night. We were all exhausted. It was the afternoon. And we got into bed, pulled her pillow up or fluffing the pillow or something, and found a gun that she slept with under her pillow for protection. Mm-hmm. And as you know, she died from domestic violence. Not, if she would have had that gun out, I don't know. Maybe she wouldn't have been able to use it against her. It was her ex-husband. But there's a lot of situations where you can look in, and they say that women are living in households with guns because the male has the gun and they use those to intimidate the women. However, if women are empowered, I don't want to say enabled, to have guns through outreach, then the tables could be turned. And that's not just the woman against feeling that she's in a domestic situation that's dangerous, but it's also, taking her kids out and feeling protective.
And a gun, I mean, it's the cliche, right? But it's true. It's the equalizer.
Yeah.
An 80-pound woman is just as lethal as the 300-pound bodybuilder if they both got guns. So I'm a huge fan and proponent of women becoming more comfortable with guns. It's like anything else. You can get used to it.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
You learn. It takes time, and you don't have to go crazy with it, but just get just enough familiarity with it so that it doesn't freak you out, and so that you can have a weapon for protection and feel like, if you really had to, you would know what to do. And,
yes.
And that's especially for women who don't have the benefit of a spouse, boyfriend, or whatever as the quote unquote protector. Mm-hmm. And again, that's just the reality of the human existence. A woman by herself with her children is going to be more of a target for a criminal than a woman with her man with her, because he represents a serious threat to a criminal.
Well, and it comes back to the crime of opportunity, like you said. And so if you are, going out to your car, if you're a female alone, and you're a crime of opportunity. I mean, there was that terrible situation where the woman jogger was.
Right.
Yeah.
That just happened.
And, so I think he was stalking her. I don't know that was such a crime of opportunity. I can't remember that case exactly. But, with all of the new gun ownership, I think a lot of I'm hoping that in the future, a lot of the stereotypes of current gun owners are going to be dispelled, because I think one of the things about good gun owners today, from what I'm reading, is that since they are joining these organizations, they are very interested in being good at gun owners. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're eventually going to end up with a generation of good gun owners. They want to go in. They want to take classes. They want to learn how to store their guns safely. They want to not leave it out on the counter for their kids to pick up.
Right, and they want to be legal.
They want to be
citizens.
legal citizens. They want to be legal carriers.
These people, they don't want to listen. The punishments for gun violations are so severe. Nobody wants to violate these laws. I mean, the vast majority of people. So, yeah, people.
Unless you're living on the edge of society and you're sort of breaking other laws. But
Right.
if you're just like a normal
normal person.
who's just, stopping at your stop signs and doing everything you're supposed to do, you also, and you want to be a gun owner, you want to do it legally. You want to go through the proper channels. And I think I think that is typical of the generation of gun owners we're seeing now.
Okay, well, I think we
I think we covered a lot.
covered a lot there, and hopefully I actually learned something from this process about what a gun owner is. I didn't know that data that you have. I think that was really, really informative.
I could not believe what was the most shocking to me was the amount of people who have used guns in confrontation, self-defense situations. How you hear about that, but then actually seeing the respondents on here, how many times,
Whether or not they actually fired the weapon.
and whether or not they actually fired the weapon, and then that was such a small percentage of people that just had to say that they had the gun.
Well, it kind of makes sense, even if you just think about it from the Hollywood standpoint, right? How many scenes do you see in a movie where the guy just brandishes a weapon or points it at the guy and says, "You better think twice," And not even a cop situation, just out there in the streets or whatever, confronting somebody who's trying to do you harm. Oftentimes those scenes don't end with a gunshot, right? The perpetrator, if you will, backs down, and the situation is quote unquote diffused. I mean, even in Hollywood, that's a pretty common scenario. You got to imagine in real life, could be much more common in a lot of those circumstances.
In Hollywood, that actually makes up the majority of the movies.
Oh,
no,
okay.
it's even better than that in Hollywood. And then my dad, I think they were going to buy a gun and they just weren't sure what gun they were going to buy. And they were at a gun show where they were talking to some experts, and the experts said the best thing you can get is a shotgun because you can hear it clicking.
Right. Yeah.
And the perpetrators are on the other side of the house. And you say, "I've got a gun," and you click the shotgun.
Yeah. It's very distinctive.
And then the guy's going, "Oh my God, I got to get out of here." Well, there were other reasons. They said that
It won't pierce through the walls.
yeah, exactly. It's not it won't go as far, and it does more short range damage. But the idea of just hearing the gun,
There's probably a market for a shotgun sounding device.
an app on your phone, maybe.
Well, I don't think that would be enough, but like you make some kind of thing
Click, click.
that makes that sound.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, I guarantee you a lot of women who are afraid of guns in areas where they want to have that kind of protection, that would be a good thing to have all by itself for this very reason.
Yeah.
Because nobody is going to walk into a shotgun. No, unless you are crazed.
Or drugged out or
Yeah,
something.
drugged out or something. You are not going to voluntarily walk because that's death.
Yeah.
They don't have to be good aim. All they have to do is pull the trigger and your party is over.
Well, and I think that's why I think that's why this expert was saying for home defense, that's just really good.
Yeah, it's good. I
It's a
agree.
good one because and also just the idea of firing something that would go through the wall and get a neighbor or something was.
Now, the only, and we need to wrap this
We
up.
do.
But
Yeah.
the only thing I would say to that is a shotgun is more unwieldy.
Yes.
And I can see some women not wanting to manipulate a large device like that, whereas, you can get out your little .38 revolver and that's pretty easy to handle.
True.
So, I mean, there's pros and cons for all these things, but that's part of what you discover when you go down the path of saying, okay, I want to defend myself. I want to defend my family. I want to defend my children. And how am I going to go about doing that? So, okay, so this is a little segment that I like to call I Was Wrong.
Oh, Aaron, I love when you say that you're wrong.
Yes,
Actually,
lots of people do.
lots of people in your life have a lot of joy when you say
Yes,
you're wrong. And I don't say that word joy lightly.
I know, and
Okay, it's okay.
not sure what that says about me, but moving on.
No.
So as you know, I like to play pickleball. And
Yes.
so that's something that I play almost every day now. And where I play, it's kind of just it's like a pickup game. You just kind of show up and you put your paddle up, and then one of the four people that were playing in that game has to come out if your paddle is up. And so you end up playing with lots of different people and lots of different levels and lots of different personalities.
And just let me interject
Yeah.
that pickleball personalities are pretty interesting. People that are really into it
Yeah,
are very
well,
intense.
yeah. There are people that are like super crazy, but and that's like any
Yeah.
sport.
I guess so many people play. I think I'm more in tuned with it.
Well, and I mean, people would probably consider me a serious player, but when I'm playing, I'm not like one of those, I got to win at all costs, stern face. I'm laughing and joking, and if I get upset, it's always at myself. I'll yell at myself. Come on,
Big self-critic.
Yeah,
Yes.
big self-critic. Anyway, so over the last few months, there has been a guy there who I've had to play against or with on my team, and he's kind of sour in person. He's quiet. He doesn't say much. Most people are joking or laughing, at least on some level. Super serious, and he's maybe 10 years younger than me. And a lot of people were like, he seems kind of a jerk. I always think he's mad at me. And everybody always had this idea about him that he was kind of a general sour person. And then one day I came to him and I saw him first thing in the morning. I said, "So how are you doing?" He says, "Well, actually terribly, but thank you for asking." And so I let it go. Like, oh, wow, okay. And a couple weeks later, I said the same thing. And I said, "So how's it going?" He says, "Well, let me tell you, every day I have to take care of both of my parents. One is dementia and the other is bedridden with cancer.
Oh, dear.
And when COVID started, I was laid off, and me and my 3 siblings, we would take turns taking care of mom and dad. Well, after I got laid off, it basically became my full-time job, and so that's what I've been doing." And he said, "The only time I can kind of break away from that is when I come to the pickleball court."
Oh.
And so, I'm like, you go from, gosh, this guy seems like kind of a jerk, to he seems like one of the most noble human beings imaginable. Here is this 40-year-old man who's put his life on hold, essentially, to take care of his 2 ailing parents.
Very ailing, it sounds like. They're not just slightly ailing.
And he can't even stay, that's why he can only go away for about an hour. And I'm not sure, he might have to have somebody basically babysit for that hour, because the one with dementia, they can sometimes walk out of the house and stuff. So I was wrong about, you just don't know. Sometimes people, you don't know what their struggles are, and they can be, he's actually a really funny, nice guy. As I've, kind of talked to him, he's not a talkative guy. I'm not trying to say
He has a lot on his shoulders.
But yeah, he has a lot. And so when he comes there, and also the way he plays, he's one of these guys who he loves to just hit hard. And, the game has a lot of finesse and stuff. And there are people who just like to go out there and hit hard. And it totally makes sense now.
He's getting his feelings out.
Yeah, all his aggression, his frustrations. He doesn't care, and that's why he's not there to have conversations really with people. He's there to just kind of vent in some physical way.
But gosh, I find it really special that you asked him and that he actually
and that he
gave
actually
you that
said
response,
something.
because
Right.
it's almost like he's now known to one person at
Yeah.
pickleball.
Yeah,
Because it is a community atmosphere.
It's a total community
Yeah.
atmosphere, and like I said, usually if he says anything, it's kind of a
Eeyore type of
negativish kind of joke, right?
Yeah.
Not a funny joke, more of a kind of a downer joke, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, that's the thing. You sometimes you just don't know, and I consider myself a pretty good judge of character, and I never really thought he was a really horrible person or anything. I'm not saying that, but
Well, you also don't get offended by people, so very, very
yeah,
easily.
it takes a lot for me.
So
yeah,
someone like that you wouldn't feel personally.
personally thing. Although before this, there was an incident with him and another girl who I know, and they just like were just completely at odds with him. And independently, I thought they were both reasonable people, and that happened like the day before this, and I think it kind of was bringing things to a head where he
had to tell someone.
Yeah, he had to say something, and I'm not saying I'm the only person he said that to. I just don't know, but he's not very talkative, and most people don't really engage him in conversation, and so that's the thing. I was wrong about maybe what his
You're wrong about your first impression,
yeah,
or
what
second impression.
what his situation is, and what kind of person he actually is, and when people are under that kind of intense pressure and stress, especially for a long period of time, which for him, it sounds like it's been basically the last year and a half or 2 years, it's going to make somebody appear maybe on the outside to be something other than who they really are.
Yeah, you wonder what he was like in 2018.
Yeah.
What was he doing?
Yeah, because it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was one of these outgoing jokester types. Mm-hmm. I could totally see that. And maybe he'll be able to get there again. But right now, he's doing something, and you ask yourself, it's like, oh my gosh, could I do that? If I was in that situation? You always question yourself. It's like the same thing when I was in the military. You wonder, if I'm in an actual battle situation, will I live up to the expectations? You always have that kind of doubt. Of course, it turns out for most people, when they're in a situation, you don't even think about it because you're just reacting, and the vast majority of people react at least in our military, I think, in a noble, proper way. But you never really know. When you're thinking about it abstractly, you're like, oh, gosh, could I do that?
Jump in front of the whatever to save my child, or something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah,
right.
You're like, of course, I think I would do that, but I hope that I would do that.
But would I when it actually happened?
Were you ever tested like that in the military?
No, I was not.
Okay.
No, I was not.
I know you have some friends.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends, and so we've talked about that topic. But yeah, so that was the thing. I didn't, and I don't even. I don't know if this is a complete I was wrong, as much as it was maybe my preconceived notions lacked enough knowledge to actually come to any conclusions. And
well, that's everyone's life every day.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Really, it's the person at the grocery store. It's, it's anyone you come in contact with that you're only going to be in contact with briefly, or over situations where you don't actually, the interaction is not based on personal information.
Right.
So you could have just engaged him in pickleball forever and never known. But we have those kind of connections all day long.
Yeah, you're always coming across people, and so that is maybe what would you say, a sales pitch for be kind to people, because you don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe your little moment of kindness is going to change their day.
I absolutely think that look people in the eye, see that they're known, engage with cashiers, be friendly. Try not, you don't want to be on your high horse about being on your phone, but try not to be on your phone when you're when you're moving through a line or something like that. It's worthwhile looking at the people around you and seeing what they're doing, smiling at people. People always like my glasses. I have 2 pairs of eyeglasses that I wear. This is a funny thing. And everyone in line, all the cashiers, it's really interesting, especially...
They all comment on your glasses?
I have so many people comment on, I love your glasses, they say.
Wow.
But if you're looking at people, you've opened up a conversation there.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you. I love these glasses. Or you know what? I got these glasses. My daughter hates these glasses. So, but I'm glad that you like them. Thank you. And
Does she really? She doesn't like your daughter? Doesn't like
these
them?
ones are okay, but my other pair that I wear, she does not like them. But they're the ones I get the most compliments on. So it's
Is she like, Mom, I'm not going in the store with you wearing those?
no, but she's just like, I don't really like those because teenage girls are pretty honest with their
Right.
moms. And, but without making the subject too long, Isaac's in a class right now on rhetoric, and one of the things the teacher talks about a lot is the importance of small talk. And he's really big proponent of small talk. He has them actually engaging in groups in small talk because his theory is that there's so much that happens during small talk.
That's actually a cool topic because I agree with that. I just know from my own experience. I don't engage in small talk with strangers very much. That's not really kind of who I am. However, if I make a point of doing it, the information gleaned from small talk, in fact, you probably don't remember anything that you talk about, but you remember what you gleaned from the person through the course of the conversation.
Well, the whole event, the whole discussion you had, even if it was a minute to 2 minutes with the gentleman at the pickleball court, was a result of small talk.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So you can make someone's day with small talk.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of things happen in society. When we give up small talk with everyone around us, we lose a lot of connection.
Which begs the question. In the COVID era, in the communication via only social media era, is small talk kind of dead for people that only interact that way? I mean, do you do?
Absolutely, it's dead,
Yeah,
I think.
I don't think you can really small talk.
Over Zoom?
Yeah, well,
Because you have to call someone.
maybe over Zoom you could right,
you're
but it's not going to be a random encounter.
Well, yeah, that's the whole
Right,
point, is the
right.
random encounter.
And you certainly aren't going to do it, on Facebook or something like
No, you
you wouldn't take it takes it's way too much effort even if you wanted to.
yeah, a lot of small talk happens in real life, in interactions that are not ultimately important. Mm-hmm. And for instance, my son was at Target, and he ended up asking the checkout lady what was going on, how was she doing, and they were in the course of that conversation. She started telling him the story how during the carnival that happened in San Clemente, during the rainstorm, how all these students flooded Target and caused $10,000 worth of damage.
How did they cause the damage?
They were they were running around, taking Halloween costumes off of the shelves, putting them on, knocking things
So
off
it was like
the
a little
shelves.
riot? Like a little...
I don't think you described it as a riot. It was a bunch of kids that were misbehaving.
But they were deliberately trying to be...
Deliberately just being wild because of the rain, and they were having to sort of escape the rain and come inside. And, the Target employees can't do anything about it. But this all happened in the course of this, how are you doing conversation,
Right.
and all this stuff. And he ends up finding out about this, something we didn't know about. So it all happened from small talk. Oh, well.
Okay, well, I think that's it for me. Did you have anything you wanted
I
to...
didn't. I just want to thank you for today's podcast.
Yes, and thank you. I really enjoy having our discussions, and hopefully other people find it somewhat interesting.
I
and
think they will.
entertaining, too.
I think they will. There is a lot of good information. It was data heavy, but if you get through that, and the meat of the story is that we need to really pick and choose how we describe gun owners in America. And right now we are.
Or at the very least, don't assume you actually know
Don't assume.
who you're talking about when you throw that term around.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily the person that you have in your head, the vision that you have in your head, or the image.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I guess that's it for this time.
Okay. Goodbye.
Until our next podcast,
Yes.
I guess I'll have to think about it.
I'll have to think about it.
See you next time.
See you next time. Thank you for listening to the I'll Think About It podcast. We hope we've given you something to think about. Please share us with your friends and on your social media. Goodbye for now.